Okay, so today's question is asking us, by the end of the novel, Agnes comes to terms with her past. To what extent do you agree with this statement? Okay, so we're going to follow the same process that we've been following all along. So I haven't been given a cognitive verb, but I know that I am going to need to analyze. In terms of any verb that indicates our author's intention, that this question doesn't exactly have that, but it definitely has a subject. So Agnes has come to terms with her past. So that's what we're going to be analysing here. There obviously is a whole heap of other stuff in this question that we are going to unpack to make sure that we know exactly what we are doing. So it says by the end of the novel. That's really important. So I want to think about, well, what happens at the end of the novel? And obviously I know that that is the execution. When I'm looking at Agnes, I know that she is the protagonist. When I'm looking at has come to terms, so if I'm coming to terms with something, I'm accepting it, I'm okay with it. With her past. So this is the, I guess, the juicy part of the question. I want to have a think about, well, what do I know about her past? What is her past? And what does that sort of entail? So I know that she was born illegitimate. So I'm going to write that. I know that she was abandoned. I know that there is quite a lot of trauma there. And I could definitely unpack on this one. I know that when, I can unpack on all of them, of course. Now I also know that when I've got a to what extent question, I need to have a think of, well, how much do I agree? So to what extent is how much. So once I've worked all of those things out, I feel like I understand my question. We know that there are some other things we might choose to do if we don't quite understand our question yet. I could pop it into my own words. I could continue breaking things down, but at this point I'm feeling pretty confident, so I'm going to start to brainstorm some possible ideas. So before I mentioned that when we're looking at things like Agnes's trauma, there's a lot that we can talk about. She has been through some massive hardships. So in terms of traumatic experiences that she has been through, there is obviously Natan's murder, because that is a part of her past by the end of the novel. There is Inga's death. It's her treatment that she has received by society. We know that if we're going to talk about society in the exam, we're going to be specific about which society we're referring to. But for our planning, that'll be okay. Her childhood in general. Now, I could keep going because, like I said, Agnes has gone through a lot, but I'm going to leave it at this for now so that I can keep going with some other elements of her past. Now, we could always say that everything else we're going to say is kind of linked into the traumatic experiences, and this is what I'm realizing as I'm starting to write, which is what happens when we plan. Okay, abandonment. So Agnes is abandoned by her mother. Agnes is abandoned by her brother. And Agnes is also abandoned by her foster father. Now, when we're looking at Agnes's past, we might also look at relationships. And of course, when we're looking at relationships, we're going to look at family, friends, and romantic relationships. When I'm looking at family, this is when I'm going to make a note of the fact that she was born illegitimate. Now, as I've started to do this, obviously I could keep going. As I always say, there's always so much to talk about, but for now I'm going to leave it at this. And I'm really having it highlighted to me just how wonky my whiteboard writing is. But you know what? It does the job. Now, when I'm looking at each of these, I'm now going to go through them and I'm going to say whether or not she has come to terms with these things that have happened. So has she accepted them? Has she overcome? Has she healed? All of that kind of stuff. I might have two highlighters and I might highlight in one color things that she has overcome and in another color things that she has not. So I'm just going to tick in different colors for today. So in terms of her childhood, I would say that she has not overcome that. Treatment by society, to an extent, yes. Inga's death, I'm gonna say no. Natan's murder, no. The fact that she's illegitimate, yeah, I'm gonna say to an extent. Her family in general, no, I would say that's still haunting her. I don't really think that her friends has had that much of an impact on her. Romantic, I think somewhat. This is a tricky one. I think that through talking to Toti and Margaret about her relationship with Natan, I think that shows me that she's come to terms with it. Not entirely, but the fact that she's able to open up and talk about it makes me think yes. I wish I had a colour for kind of, but I'm just going to tick it for now. In terms of the abandonment, I think towards the end she has come to terms with her mother because she allows Margaret in, which I think is indicative of the fact that she has healed a little bit there. And same with the brother. I think with the sisters she's represented that, and with the foster father, I don't know if there's enough there for me to comment on that one, so I'm just going to leave that for now. I wanted to talk about the fact that she is so concerned with Toti leaving, and I think that that's reflective of the fact that she hasn't healed and overcome all of the abandonment that she faced from her family. And I was thinking that as I was writing, and then as I'm editing, I've realized that I never put it in there. So future me is telling past me that the fact that she gets so fixated on Toti leaving is hugely indicative of the fact that she's not overcome that traumatic experience. I need to expand on this and see if I can come up with any evidence to see if I can start to put together a bit of a thesis statement. So in terms of her childhood, I've said that she hasn't quite healed from that. I think I would go as far as to say that her childhood haunts her because she talks about it a lot. I feel like she is thinking about it a lot, not always talking about it. And I think that that's a big deal for her. In terms of the way that Natan's murder impacts her, like obviously she doesn't come to terms with, actually this makes me want to add another point. A traumatic experience for her is that she's sentenced to death. And we know that this has a massive impact on her. And I'm going to talk about like the last chapter because that shows us just how much that is getting to her, I suppose. With Natan's murder, the fact that she still reflects on it shows that it is still there. Inga's death, this makes me think about the fact that she brings up I'm thinking of the part in the text when she talks about thinking that she's the reason that she dies. So she's still kind of blaming herself. Now, moving on to this side, is there anything else that okay, in terms of her family, the fact that, again, there's that reflection there, and I also want to look at these kinds of things, that like the Cornsa family, I think I spelled that wrong, help her heal. I think that that's really important. When it comes here, I'm going to talk about, I'm thinking about like a Toti and how she opens up to him and how that shows us that she has kind of healed a little bit. So now that I'm looking at all of this, I'm starting to think that perhaps she has slightly come to terms with her past, but it still is something that haunts her. So looking at that, I'm starting to think of a possible thesis statement, and I'm thinking that it'll be something that's kind of reflective of, to a minor extent, or to a small extent, to a minimal extent. So let's put together a thesis statement. Okay, so my thesis statement here says, through the relationships that Agnes forms in the text, Kent suggests that Agnes has come to terms with her past to a minimal extent. I think that thesis statement is going to tick all the boxes. I think that I could prove it in an essay. I think there's enough evidence. I think that I could do it in 800 to 1,000 words. I think that it is going to work out. As always, once I start to plan my arguments, start to write, I might go back and change things up a little bit, but for now I feel like it works. Now, in terms of choosing my body paragraphs, I'm going to have 3 body paragraphs. We know that that's not a set number that you have to have, but on average, that's how many we see. And because it's I've said to a minimal extent, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 2 paragraphs where I show that she has not come to terms with her past, and then I'm going to have 1 paragraph that shows that she has come to terms with her past. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I've said it's through relationships, I want to kind of show that the relationships show that she's healed a little bit because she's able to open up to people, she's able to make connections. However, the focus of those connections are on these traumatic experiences that she has had, which demonstrate that she is haunted by what has happened. But also the use of flashbacks, narrative viewpoint, all of that kind of stuff further suggests that. Now, because that's the angle I'm going to take, I want to set up the fact that she has these relationships first. So my first body paragraph is going to be agreeing with it. And I'm going to say that the relationships that she has with Margaret and Toti are like cathartic because they're quite healing and therapeutic. Now, I'm going to run out of room, so I'm just going to write things shorthand. I would never do this in the essay. Now, I'm going to have to think about some places in the text that demonstrate this cathartic nature. So I might talk about, I might look at, the juxtaposition. From when she first, from first interaction to last. And I'm going to be able to show this through dialogue. Now, I need to make sure that I'm looking at this from Agnes's perspective. So I'm not going to talk about the fact that Margaret doesn't like her to begin with, but then Margaret grows to like her, but rather Agnes is very closed off. She doesn't say anything. She says things like, my first words in days. And then towards the end, we have them sitting down to a nice warm drink, having a little bit of a D&M. So that's what I'm going to show here. I would write that in my planning if I had the space. I am also going to talk about, so that's what that paragraph's going to be. Then in my second paragraph, I'm going to look at the fact that Agnes is haunted by her past. I'm going to look at this being demonstrated through the motif of dreams, because she has a couple of dreams that demonstrate this. I'm also going to talk about her, I guess, fear of being forgotten. Actually, no, I'm going to talk about that in my next paragraph. I'm going to talk about the fact that the blaming herself for I'm also going to look at the flashbacks to childhood. Now, I really am running out of room here. If only I didn't have such big handwriting. Maybe I'll go into this little corner here. Okay, I'm gonna go there. Let me just board it off. Okay, so then for my third paragraph, I'm going to talk about the fact that Agnes allows her past to define her. And we see that when she says, when she uses the quote, when she's like, I don't want to be forgotten, I don't want to be remembered, I want to be here. I think that she says that because she thinks that her story has already been told, if that makes sense. So she doesn't have the ability to continue to change that narrative that's been created for her. So dialogue is definitely reflective of this. And when she's talking to Toadie and she says, other men, like what other men think is important about me. So she allows that to happen. And obviously that's going to be because of her past, right? So I'm just going to make a note there for myself. Like obviously my whole essay is about the past, but I don't want myself to forget my train of thought there. I also am thinking about the part in the text when she is with Natan. And when she says he liked the fact that I was a bastard, a pauper, a servant. I think that's really significant because it's showing that she's allowing her past to define her here. Now I have written notes to myself in terms of like juxtaposition motifs, but I haven't actually given the example of those. I would do that in my planning if I wasn't planning on a whiteboard, because it's really important that by the time I get to writing my essay that I have that there for me, because I don't want to write like self-blame and then kind of think, well, what did I mean there? I also think like when I start to think about this like self-blame, I think what sticks out a little bit more now that I'm reflecting is that she thinks she caused her own death. And that's such a big point, and I can't believe I didn't think of that earlier, but that's what happens, right? As we start to progress forward, we think, oh, what about this? So she caused her own death. Maybe I want to die too. And then through flashbacks, we see that she's still reflecting on that, still thinking about that, thus it's still having an impact on her. I feel like this video ended really abruptly. Actually, I know it ended really abruptly because the bell went and students started walking into my classroom. But thank you very much for watching. I hope that this was helpful. Please continue to send me practice essays and any questions that you might have. I hope that all of your revision is going really well, that you are feeling really nice and confident, because if you've watched this video, then you've done everything that you can do, I assume. So you should feel really nice and confident. Also, I am really working on not saying so much. I just, and also throughout the video when I looked down, just so you know, it's because I took photos of the notes that I had written on the whiteboard, because I kept having to rub it off, just in case you were curious as to what I was doing. Okay, well, I love you all very much, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!